imagine your office HR department operating exactly like the East German secret police.
Oh, man. That is quite the image.
Right, but think about it. Like, your coworkers are quietly incentivized to anonymously report you for just, everyday words.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no presumption of innocence in that scenario.
Exactly. The jury deciding your fate is, well, it's entirely ideologically rigged from the start. You're constantly looking over your shoulder.
Filtering every syllable, yeah.
Because you're terrified that a completely innocent phrase could literally end your career overnight. And according to a highly controversial new book we're exploring today, that isn't some dystopian fiction.
No, the author argues it's the absolute reality of the modern American workplace.
It really is. And, usually when we talk about a complex system like a mechanical watch or a car engine, there's an expectation of transparency.
Sure, you can take the back off the watch and see the gears.
Right. You see all the little gears spinning. A mechanic can just point and say, yeah, there it is. That gear turns this one. Action, reaction.
Yeah, it makes logical sense.
Exactly. But then you look at modern society. You look at the institutions we all navigate every single day.
The workplace, the dating market, the legal system.
Academia, all of it.
Yeah.
And suddenly, that watch back is just welded shut. And the gears inside seem to be spinning in entirely unexpected, deeply counterintuitive directions.
Which, that creates a profound sense of institutional whiplash for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Especially depending on where you're standing in society when you're looking at those gears turn.
Yeah, it really depends on your vantage point.
And that feeling of whiplash is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to another deep dive, everybody.
It's going to be an intense one.
It really is. But hey, before we dive into the deep end, I want to remind you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now.
Definitely do that because we have a highly requested topic today.
We do. We are doing a comprehensive, totally unfiltered review of a deeply controversial new ebook that dropped this year in 2025.
It's by Conrad Riker, right?
Yeah, Conrad Riker. And it's titled The Truth About Feminism, a deconstruction from a man's perspective.
And just a heads up, it is a massive, unapologetic text.
It really is. Now, I'll tell you up front, if you are at all intrigued by today's discussion, and I promise you, you will be hooked, you are highly encouraged to head over to Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books to buy it for yourself.
Yeah, it really does not pull any punches in its diagnosis of modern society.
Not even a little bit. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore the book's really intense arguments.
Arguments that are specifically designed for men seeking the red pill perspective, as he calls it.
Right, the red pill perspective on modern society. We are going to map out the author's historical timeline today.
Because we really want to understand how our foundational institutions operated before they were allegedly captured.
Captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies, exactly. So I'm speaking directly to you, the listener, right now.
Yeah, if you're interested in the men's rights movement,
or if you identify with the manosphere, or honestly, even if you just simply want to understand the underlying architecture of this heavily debated worldview.
This deep dive is custom tailored to unpack those exact concepts for you.
But we do need to lay some firm ground rules before we take a single step further.
We really do, because this source material contains highly politically charged content.
Very much so. It is a fierce, relentless critique of left-wing institutions, modern feminism, and, just societal norms in general.
Yes, and because of that, we are laying down a firm, crystal clear disclaimer right now.
We are not taking sides. We do not endorse the viewpoints, the politics, or the claims of the content provided.
Right. We are here acting purely as impartial guides.
Exactly. We're going to rigorously explore and report on the arguments exactly as they're presented in the original source material.
We just want you to understand the mechanisms of what the book says and why it argues what it argues.
Our job is just synthesis and analysis of the text in front of us.
Yeah.
Like we said, we're just opening the back of the watch.
So let's look under the hood of Riker's core argument then.
Yeah, he essentially posits that we are living in a matrix. Specifically like a feminist constructed matrix that has systematically captured our modern institutions.
And he traces this back historically, which is really interesting.
I am so curious how he actually maps this out. Like, where does he say this all started?
He actually goes quite far back. He points to early movements, most notably the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention.
Wow, 1848. That's going back a bit.
It is. Now, he explicitly acknowledges that this was originally a noble cause.
Right, because that was about demanding basic fundamental voting rights.
Exactly. Voting rights and property rights for women. But then he introduces this sociological concept he coins as wait for it, the suffrage slippery slope.
The suffrage slippery slope. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around the logic there.
It's a bold term.
It is. How does a movement for basic voting rights morph into the institutional capture he's talking about today? Like, what's the mechanism?
The mechanism he describes is basically bureaucratic survival.
Bureaucratic survival.
Yeah. He argues that the initial demand for the vote acted kind of like a Trojan horse.
Oh, I see.
Once the primary legal and political goals were achieved, once women got the vote and equal protection under the law, the massive organizational machinery didn't just pack up and go home.
Because institutions rarely voluntarily dissolve themselves, right?
Exactly. They need a reason to exist. They need funding. So, according to Riker, they shifted their focus from concrete legal equality to abstract social grievances.
So moving the goalposts.
Right. And over decades, he claims these movements basically morphed into ideological re-education camps just to sustain their own relevance.
Man, it sounds like he's describing an autoimmune disease.
That is a great way to put it.
Like the institutional antibodies that were originally designed to fight off genuine systemic sexism have hypermutated.
Yeah, and now they were just attacking healthy, merit-based cells because the system literally can't tell the difference anymore. That is a very accurate way to visualize his argument, and he specifically targets modern academia as ground zero for this.
Ground zero. So he's looking at colleges.
Specifically sociology departments. He points to data suggesting that 82% of them now mandate feminism or gender theory courses for students.
82%. That is a massive majority.
It is. Meanwhile, programs dedicated to men's studies or male psychology are, according to him, virtually non-existent.
Okay, so if academia is the engine room of this ideology, how does he demonstrate that it's actively hostile to men, rather than just passively biased?
Well, he builds his case around a series of highly publicized campus incidents.
Do we have specific examples?
We do. He views these as empirical evidence of the capture. For instance, he highlights a 2017 incident at the University of Michigan.
Oh, right. What happened there?
So, a male student was actually hauled before a disciplinary committee right in the middle of a gender studies lecture.
Wait, just for speaking up in class, what did he even do?
He cited Bureau of Labor Statistics data.
You mean like official federal economic data?
Exactly. During a discussion on the gender wage gap, the student pointed out that the often quoted 77 cents on the dollar statistic is a raw, unadjusted average.
Right.
He argued that when economists actually control for variables like chosen occupation, hours worked per week, danger pay, and career interruptions,
The gap almost entirely evaporates, right? That's a pretty standard economic counterargument.
Yeah. But bringing up federal economic data in a university classroom sounds like exactly what you're supposed to do in college, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's academic debate. That's what you pay tuition for.
Under a traditional academic framework, yes. But Riker points out that the response from the professor wasn't to date the economic variables or challenge the statistics.
What was the response then?
According to the text, the professor accused the student of weaponizing facts.
Weaponizing facts. Wow.
Yeah, and claimed he was creating a hostile learning environment.
That is, the book frames this as a purely Orwellian scenario, I assume.
Entirely Orwellian, Riker argues that in these captured institutions, facts are literally treated as hate speech if they contradict the established ideological narrative.
That is a total paradigm shift. If the goal is no longer objective truth, but rather ideological comfort, then the entire purpose of the university has been inverted.
It really has. And the book claims this isn't just about classroom debates either.
It extends to how universities handle discipline and the law, right?
Correct. The book takes a very dark turn when it examines Title IX.
Okay, Title IX. Historically, that was a 1972 civil rights law, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was meant to ensure equal funding for men's and women's sports and education.
Right.
But Riker argues it has been weaponized into a shadow justice system. He points to another incident at the same university, this time in 2021.
At Michigan again. What happened?
A male student was expelled following an accusation of misconduct.
Okay.
But according to Riker's breakdown of the case, the expulsion happened after a 10-minute campus tribunal hearing.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, with zero physical proof, no corroborating witnesses, and the accuser couldn't even provide a coherent timeline of the alleged event.
A 10-minute hearing. In a real court of law, You have the presumption of innocence.
Exactly.
You have the right to cross-examine your accuser. You have actual rules of evidence.
And that is exactly Riker's point. He argues that these campus tribunals have entirely bypassed the U.S. Constitution.
Because it's a private institutional court, basically.
Right. The book uses this to argue that due process, the foundation of Western law, has been replaced by a presumption of guilt if you are male.
So he sees it as a localized, campus-level implementation of the believe all women policy.
Exactly, which he argues is mathematically designed to produce false convictions.
Man, so if we follow that thread, these college students eventually graduate, right?
They do.
They enter the workforce. So how does Riker see this campus ideology translating into the corporate world?
Well, the book describes corporate America vividly. He calls it an estrogen-soaked minefield.
An estrogen-soaked minefield. That is a heavy phrase.
It is. Riker's argument is that the activists who were trained in those sociology departments didn't just disappear.
Right, they had to get jobs.
Yeah, they graduated and took jobs in human resources. They took the campus tribunal model and literally installed it in Fortune 500 companies.
I really want to look at the specific corporate examples he uses because they are wild.
They really illustrate his point.
Like the book details this 2017 case in Silicon Valley. Have you seen this?
Yeah, the debugging story. Right.
Yes. So a male software engineer is working late with his team, looking at a broken piece of software, and he says, let's debug this code.
Which is a completely standard technical phrase.
A totally mundane phrase. My grandmother knows what debugging is. But a colleague reported him for microaggressions.
Unbelievable.
They claimed the word bug inherently evoked male violence and pest control against marginalized groups.
And what happened to him?
He was fired within 48 hours.
Wow. The author uses that specific, almost surreal example to illustrate a massive tectonic shift in corporate power dynamics.
You mentioned earlier the idea of an HR department acting like the Stasi. This is exactly where Riker applies that.
Yeah, he points to 2023 data from Deloitte showing that 89% of Fortune 500 HR vice presidents are women.
89%. I mean, that is a staggering monopoly on a specific corporate function.
Exactly. And Riker argues that when one specific demographic holds a near total monopoly on the workplace judiciary, because that's what HR is, really.
Right, they decide who gets fired, who gets promoted, who gets disciplined.
Exactly. So when they have that monopoly, you inevitably get what he calls kangaroo courts, driven by estrogen-fueled moral panics.
So the argument is that the believe all women policy, when ported into the corporate world, is not actually a mechanism for justice or safety.
No, he views it as a naked power grab to eliminate male competition.
And the book points out that this isn't just a grassroots HR movement either. It's coming from the very top echelons of corporate governance.
Yeah, he cites a 2021 McKinsey report for this.
The one that literally advised CEOs to intentionally reduce male influence.
That's the one. It advised them to reduce male influence in leadership by promoting women regardless of merit, simply to hit equity targets.
So think about your own commute this morning if you're listening to this. Think about the guys you see on the train heading into the office.
What does this environment actually do to the psychology of the everyday working guy?
Yeah, what does it do?
It forces them underground. The book points to a Cato Institute finding that 67% of men now actively self-censor their opinions on gender issues.
67%.
Yeah, or really any controversial topic in the workplace.
Yeah.
They are absolutely terrified of HR repercussions.
So they're just keeping their heads down, doing their jobs, and trying not to be noticed by the system.
Exactly. And Riker even gives a name to this survival tactic, right?
He advises men to use something called the gray rock method.
Right. And the gray rock method is actually a concept borrowed from clinical psychology.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's usually recommended for victims of narcissistic abuse. The idea is that if you are dealing with a narcissist, you make yourself as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally flat as a gray rock.
Ah, because the narcissist feeds on drama and emotional reactions.
Precisely. If you give them nothing, they eventually get bored and look for another target.
So Riker is directly mapping the psychological profile of a clinical narcissist onto the modern corporate HR department.
That's exactly what he's doing. He tells men to become as uninteresting as a spreadsheet, nod blankly during diversity training, show zero emotion, and just outlast the madness.
Man, that is incredibly bleak. But it speaks to a profound sense of alienation and paranoia.
And the book claims this systemic targeting isn't just corporate either. It extends all the way to federal law enforcement.
Right. Riker brings up a truly alarming allegation. He says that in 2020, the FBI classified male book clubs that we're discussing Jordan Peterson's work as potential domestic terror cells.
Under their counterintelligence guidelines, yeah.
That's just wild.
It highlights Riker's core thesis that masculinity itself is being pathologized by the state.
Because from his perspective, an institution like the FBI viewing men trying to better themselves through reading as a terror threat.
It's proof that the Matrix views independent male thought as an existential danger.
Right. So if corporate and academic spaces have been entirely captured by this ideology, according to the text, the next logical frontier the book tackles is how this ideology eventually has to clash with objective reality.
Specifically, the hard science of biology.
Right.
That is the crux of Section 2. It is essentially a battleground between what Riker sees as fabricated ideological gender quotas and the unforgiving hard truths of evolutionary biology.
So the central thesis here is that biology doesn't negotiate.
It doesn't care about social justice.
And it certainly doesn't care about your feelings.
Not at all.
So if this is fundamentally a clash with biology, how does Riker actually prove that? Like, does he have biological data, or is it just his opinion on how men and women act?
Oh, he brings data. He leans heavily on the established field of evolutionary psychology.
Okay, what's his primary anchor for that?
One of his primary anchors is David Buss's highly cited 37 culture study.
Who is David Buss?
He's a very prominent evolutionary psychologist, and this massive study showed that across the globe, across wildly different cultures, political systems, economic realities,
What do they find?
women universally prioritize dominance, competence, and status in their mates.
Wow. Which flies completely in the face of the modern media narrative.
Totally.
Riker uses this to dismantle the concept of toxic masculinity, doesn't he?
He does. He's basically saying society is calling these inherently male traits aggression, ambition, stoicism toxic.
But female biological wiring is actively, universally selecting for them in the mating market.
Exactly. He argues you just cannot have it both ways. You cannot socialize men to be passive, hyper-emotional, and overly collaborative.
And then punish them biologically when women refuse to date them because they lash traditional status and dominance.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is how he applies this biological reality directly to the modern workplace.
Right, focusing on the friction between natural, hard-earned competency and forced diversity quotas.
Yeah. Let's look at the data he brings in for that. He points to a 2017 study from Bergen University looking at the Norwegian energy company Statoil.
Okay, what happened with Statoil?
Well, Statoil implemented a very strict mandate forcing gender-balanced engineering teams. They wanted perfect parity on their high-level technical projects.
Okay, so 50-50 men and women.
Right. And the researchers tracked the outcomes. The result was a documented 15% drop in overall productivity.
15%?
Yeah. The study explicitly noted that team cohesion and output declined because, in the rush to hit the quota, competency was deprioritized for gender optics.
So in other words, they were passing over highly experienced male engineers who had been doing the job for 20 years.
Right.
Just to put a less experienced female engineer in the role so the team photo looks right for the corporate brochure.
Basically, yeah. And he scales this up from a single company to an entire country's economy, right?
He does. He points to Norway's landmark 2008 boardroom quota law.
Oh, the one that mandated 40% female representation.
Exactly. Norway mandated that all public corporate boards must have at least 40% female representation. It was hailed globally as a massive feminist victory.
But then Riker points to a 2021 study.
Yeah, from the Norwegian School of Economics, the NHH. They looked at the long-term financial impact.
And what did they find?
The companies forced to comply with this law saw, on average, a 10% drop in profits.
10%.
A 10% drop. The author argues this is the inevitable mathematical result of systematically replacing highly qualified men with less qualified women simply to hit an arbitrary, legally mandated target.
Because the market punishes inefficiency, even if that inefficiency is socially celebrated.
Exactly. And he traces these differences in competency in certain fields back to literal brain development.
Yeah, he unpacks this whole argument surrounding spatial reasoning. He cites a massive 2022 MIT study analyzing 4.7 million Uber trips.
4.7 million trips. What did they find?
The data showed that male drivers, on average, reach their destinations 12% faster than female drivers.
12% faster.
Yeah. Now, the researchers controlled for things like speeding and aggressive driving and found the difference literally came down to spatial reasoning.
Like taking shortcuts.
Exactly. Male drivers were instinctively calculating spatial shortcuts, navigating the geometry of the city in real time, rather than just blindly following the turn-by-turn GPS directions.
And Riker argues this isn't socialization, right? It's evolutionary hardware.
Yeah, he ties that Uber data directly back to the NASA Mercury 13 program in the 1960s.
Oh, I've heard of this.
NASA was testing female astronaut candidates, and they scored 40% lower on three-dimensional spatial orientation tests than the male candidate.
40% lower.
Yes, so Riker argues that male brains evolved as essentially GPS units with testosterone firmware.
GPS units with testosterone firmware. That's a great line.
For hundreds of thousands of years, men were tracking prey across complex, three-dimensional savannas. If you didn't have elite spatial reasoning, you didn't bring home the mammoth.
And you didn't pass on your genes.
Exactly. He contrasts this brutal biological reality with the modern institutional response to it.
Right, because institutions can't change the biology, so they try to change the rules to hide the biology.
Exactly. For example, he points out the absurdity of Sweden's KTH Royal Institute of Technology.
Oh, what do they do?
They reportedly suggested exploring a ban on high-level math tests for engineering admissions.
A ban on math tests for engineering.
Yes. Specifically as a way to close the gender gap because men consistently scored higher on the spatial and quantitative sections.
That is insane.
Or consider tech design. He notes that Google Maps allegedly altered its navigational language to advise users to navigate gently instead of using the word maneuver.
Because maneuver was deemed too aggressive?
Yes, exactly. The author views this as society actively gaslighting itself. We are nerfing the world to spare feelings rather than accepting biological realities and advantages.
I really want the listener to consider the sports analogy the author uses here, because it just cuts right through the academic jargon.
Oh, the Tom Brady analogy?
Yes. Riker says that replacing merit with forced collaboration in high-stakes environments is like a football team benching Tom Brady in the Super Bowl and putting in a cheerleader at quarterback.
Just so the team can appear inclusive to the media?
Right. But the scoreboard doesn't care about your diversity statement. But I have to throw some pushback at Riker's framework here.
Go for it.
If we look at hazardous STEM jobs, like deep shaft coal mining, underwater welding, roughnecks on offshore oil rigs.
Right, the really dangerous stuff.
Where men occupy roughly 92% of the roles. How does the book explain the total lack of feminist push for 50-50 equity in those specific environments?
Oh, that contradiction is actually a central pillar of Riker's argument. Yes, he views it as undeniable proof of what he calls selective equality.
Selective equality. Okay, explain that.
His argument is that the institutional push for gender parity only ever exists for comfortable, high-status, air-conditioned jobs.
Boardrooms, corner offices, tech executive roles.
Exactly. But when it comes to the dangerous, dirty, physically destroying, and lethal jobs that actually keep civilization from collapsing.
The sisterhood is suddenly completely silent.
Yes. You don't see protests demanding more female garbage collectors or more women doing high-voltage line repair in a blizzard.
So he views this as a fundamental hypocrisy at the heart of modern feminism.
Demanding all the privileges and authority of equality without being willing to shoulder any of the hazardous, lethal burdens that men have traditionally carried.
Wow. Okay, so if men are being systematically alienated from the physical workplace by these HR policies, and they realize the game is rigged regarding selective equality.
The logical next step is that they retreat to their personal lives.
Right. They try to find control and meaning in their own homes through marriage and family.
But Riker argues the home is actually a much more dangerous legal trap than the office, right?
Well, far more dangerous, according to the text. Section 3 moves from the workplace into the courtroom, and this is where the book gets incredibly heavy.
Yeah, we move into what Riker describes as the financial and legal guillotine of modern marriage and the state.
The guillotine. He refers to family law as a $1.6 trillion divorce industrial complex.
1.6 trillion. Let's trace the logic on that. How did the family court system become a guillotine, in his view?
He claims it started with the landmark 1975 Supreme Court case, Stanton v. Stanton.
Oh, right.
Which formally established different ages of majority for child support purposes and began shifting how courts view gender in family law.
Okay, so since 1975, what happened?
He argues that feminist legal advocacy groups have essentially rewritten divorce laws from the ground up.
And he throws out some staggering statistics to support this.
He notes that 86% of all child custody defaults to mothers.
86%.
Furthermore, women initiate roughly 70% of all divorces and splits, yet they manage to keep 90% of primary custody.
So they initiate the split and keep the kids.
Yes, And he calculates that this system drains over $50 billion annually from men in the form of alimony and child support.
Often separated from any actual access to their children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He frames this system as reproductive tyranny.
And the contrast he draws with other countries is fascinating here. He points to Sweden, which actually debated the concept of paper abortion laws.
Paper abortion, what is that?
It's the concept of a legal abortion. The idea is that during the window where a woman can legally choose to terminate a pregnancy, a man could legally sign a document opting out of all rights and financial responsibilities to that child.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The argument in Sweden was that this balances the scales of reproductive agency. If women have the absolute right to choose whether or not to become a parent after conception, true equality dictates men should have a financial equivalent.
But in the U.S., Riker argues, men have absolute zero reproductive rights post-conception.
But 100% of the financial burden forced upon them by the state.
Man, he personalizes this with a story, right? The story of a guy he calls Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce is a 42-year-old electrician.
And Bruce was clear with his ex-girlfriend that he did not want kids. She assured him she was on birth control.
But she, quote-unquote, forgot to take it.
Forgot to take it. Now, Bruce is working 3 back-breaking physical jobs to fund a child he explicitly stated he didn't want.
And his wages are being aggressively garnished by the state.
Meanwhile, Riker frames the mother as getting pedicures on Bruce's dime while legally controlling when and if he ever sees the kid.
Riker uses Bruce to illustrate the absolute lack of male reproductive autonomy. And he pairs this with the statistic that takes the paranoia to another level.
Oh, the paternity fraud set.
Yeah. He cites a study from the Journal of Medical Ethics suggesting that 1 in 10 British men face paternity fraud.
1 in 10. Meaning they're raising a child, bonding with it, and paying for it, completely unaware that the child isn't biologically theirs.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to challenge the methodology there. I want to pause on that 1 in 10 stat. That sounds astronomically high for the general population.
It does.
Like, how is he defining facing paternity fraud? Is that based on a truly random sample of all fathers? Or is that 10% of men who already suspected their wives were cheating and actively ordered a DNA test?
Because if it's the latter, that heavily skews the data.
Exactly.
That is a very astute critique. The text often utilizes the highest available estimates to drive home the severity of the threat.
Right, for shock value.
Yeah. In many demographic studies, the baseline rate of non-paternity in the general population is estimated closer to 1 to 3%.
Okay, so much lower.
The 10% figure usually does come from laboratories that process contested paternity tests, meaning the sample is already biased towards suspicion.
Got it.
However, from Riker's perspective, even a 2% chance of being legally enslaved to pay for another man's biological child for 18 years without your consent is an unacceptable systemic risk.
Because the family courts actively oppose mandatory paternity testing at birth.
Yes. He argues the courts protected the mother's infidelity to ensure the child has a financial provider, sacrificing the man's right to the truth.
And if we pull back and look at how the state enforces this power,
Yeah.
Riker unpacks the Violence Against Women Act, or VGA,
Which is a massive federal funding apparatus.
What is his critique of how that money is used?
He cites a government accountability office finding that 80% of VOA grants flow directly to female-led nonprofits with absolutely zero federal oversight on how the money is spent or whether the programs are effective.
80% with zero oversight.
Yes, and he gives a very specific, damning example. A domestic violence shelter in Oregon that used federal taxpayer funds money meant to protect abused women to bankroll luxury yoga retreats in Costa Rica for its staff.
Meanwhile, as he points out, a working-class dad like Bruce, who misses a $200 child support payment because his truck broke down, gets a warrant out for his arrest.
And gets thrown in county jail.
The juxtaposition there is intentional.
Very much so. Riker likens this radical feminist use of institutional victimhood to a disruption tactic, almost like a geopolitical insurgency.
How does the mechanism work?
They manufacture outrage, they force political concessions, they secure billions in federal funding, and they repeat the cycle, completely devoid of any due process or accountability.
And to perfectly illustrate this death of due process and accountability, he brings up the ultimate cultural touchstone, Amber Heard.
Oh, yeah.
He analyzes her very public pledge to donate her $7 million divorce settlement to the ACLU. She posed with a giant check, did the media tour, secured her status as a victim advocate.
And then, as came out in trial, she just never paid it.
Never paid it. Yet the media continued to treat her as a flawless victim and her ex-husband as a monster for years.
Riker uses this as the ultimate metaphor for the integrity of modern institutional feminism. All optics, all media leverage, zero actual accountability.
And because Riker believes the legal system is this rigged, he suggests some incredibly extreme countermeasures for men trying to survive it.
Yes, and I really want to dig into these solutions because they are wild.
They are out there. He proposes something he calls alimony insurance.
Alimony insurance.
He literally advises men to pay premiums to a third party during their marriage, so that when their wife inevitably leaves them and takes half their assets, they get a cash payout to survive.
You are literally betting against the survival of your own relationship.
Exactly. And he also advocates for the MGMAP strategy,
Which stands for men going militantly armed and prepared.
He tells men to treat every single coffee date, every Tinder meetup, like an interview with an undercover HR rep.
He suggests secretly recording your interactions.
Yeah, like you're narrating a true crime podcast, just to establish a timeline of consent. So my question to you, analyzing the psychology of this text, if a guy has to secretly record his coffee dates just to feel legally safe, is the author advocating for necessary protection in a demonstrably hostile world? Or is he just pushing these guys into a state of total isolating paranoia?
That is the central tension of the entire book. From the author's stated perspective, it is absolute, non-negotiable protection.
Right.
He views the legal and social landscape as so inherently predatory toward men, where an uncorroborated accusation can ruin a life, that paranoia is simply the logical, mathematical baseline for survival.
But as an analyst looking at this objectively, you can immediately see the tragic irony.
Completely. If you adopt a hypervigilant, legally defensive, adversarial posture in every single romantic interaction, you effectively destroy the possibility of genuine vulnerability, trust, or connection.
Because in trying to perfectly protect themselves from the legal system, men end up withdrawing from the human experience entirely.
Which acts as the perfect bridge to Section 4. Because this intense distrust, this fear of the legal guillotine, leads millions of men to just check out of society entirely.
They refuse to play the game.
And they escape into what the book outlines as a massive, unprecedented modern digital crisis.
Yeah, Section 4 deals with the digital trap and the beta male apocalypse.
Riker starts by pointing to the great male suicide epidemic.
He notes that male suicide rates have tripled since 1970, right?
Tripled. He links this directly to what he terms the sexual marketplace crash.
The sexual marketplace crash.
He argues that because of online dating and social media, women's standards have hyperinflated to the point where average working class men are entirely priced out of the dating market.
So where do these completely alienated guys go? They escaped into what Riker calls the incel industrial complex.
And for listeners who might not know, incel stands for involuntarily celibate, but Riker uses it to describe a massive digital economy built entirely on monetizing male loneliness.
The author provides these two incredibly stark case studies that contrast the paths men are taking here.
The first case study is a man named Dave. Dave is a 33-year-old forklift operator.
Okay.
According to Riker, Dave is literally skipping meals, starving himself, living in squalor, so he can scrape together $12,000 a month to spend on OnlyFans models.
$12,000 a month. He's just buying artificial intimacy.
Exactly. And the book notes the brutal, tragic irony here. The creator Dave supports is posting selfies on a yacht in Dubai, a yacht essentially bought with Dave's forklift wages.
And she calls him a king in the chat.
It's a devastating illustration of how core biological drives, the desperate human desire for intimacy, validation, and connection, are being hijacked and ruthlessly monetized by digital platforms.
Leaving men both emotionally hollow and financially bankrupt.
But then Riker gives us the counterexample to show that escape is possible.
Another Dave's right.
Yes, this one from Boise. This Dave used to be a 325-pound gamer, full of rage, chugging Mountain Dew, completely checked out of life.
But he hit a breaking point.
He did. He completely unplugged. He deleted TikTok. He started taking ice-cold plunges in a trash can in his backyard to shock his nervous system.
He bought a cheap coding course, taught himself Python, and now he's making $120,000 a year living in a cabin in Montana.
Entirely self-sufficient with a jawline that could cut glass.
The juxtaposition of the two Daves is Riker's way of showing that the digital world is a meticulously engineered trap, but individual escape is possible through extreme physical and mental discipline.
But to understand why the trap exists and why so many men fall into it, the book points the finger directly at the media.
He argues that mainstream media actively, intentionally demonizes raw, natural male energy to break men down.
And he brings receipts for this media campaign. He points to that infamous 2019 Gillette ad.
Oh, I remember that. A razor company lecturing its own male customer base on toxic masculinity.
With montages of boys wrestling, bullying, and catcalling, essentially telling men they need to be better, softer versions of themselves.
He also brings up a 2021 issue of The Atlantic magazine, literally titled, Men Are Trash.
That specific issue featured 14 different essays, all written by women, without a single male perspective included.
The book claims that 92% of all op-eds written about masculinity in major publications are penned by women who have never interviewed a man outside of a divorce court.
Riker argues that this isn't just bad journalism or a cultural blind spot, it's a finely tuned algorithmic outrage machine.
Let's look under the hood of how that works. The media creates a relentless narrative that inherent masculinity is toxic.
Right.
This barrage of negative messaging alienates men, makes them feel inherently defective, and pushes them away from real-world interactions.
They go online for solace, and the algorithm is waiting for them.
Feeding them a cycle of anger, resentment, and digital escapism, whether that's porn, video games, or outrage politics.
The end result is a generation of broke, isolated, dopamine-addicted men who are easily controlled because they have no real-world power.
And the statistics he provides on this dopamine addiction are terrifying.
The book notes that the average Zoomer now spends 4.7 hours a day mindlessly scrolling on social media.
4.7 hours. This constant bombardment of short-form, high dopamine content has physically altered their brain chemistry, hasn't it?
It has, resulting in an average attention span of exactly 8.25 seconds.
8.25 seconds. You literally cannot outlast a goldfish at that point.
You really can't. You can't read a book, you can't learn a trade, you certainly can't build a legacy.
So Riker's solution is extreme. He demands a 72-hour dopamine fast, which he bases on a Stanford University neurological study.
For 72 hours, no screens, no porn, no video games, no social media, no junk food.
Just a total brutal factory reset of the brain's reward system to regain focus.
He shares a personal anecdote about this. Riker talks about a moment in 2018 where he caught himself hunched over his phone in his apartment, doom scrolling for hours, completely paralyzed.
He realized the device was, in his words, a digital vampire sucking your manhood dry.
So he took a hammer and literally smashed his iPhone on the kitchen counter.
Well, so I want to pose this to the listener and to you. We've talked about the institutional capture in academia and HR. Is the social media algorithm specifically engineered by those woke institutions to intentionally neuter men, as the book strongly implies?
Or is this just the cold, indifferent, purely profit-driven math of the tech industry keeping absolutely everyone hooked and men are just collateral damage? It's a fascinating debate. The author definitely leans toward the former. He views it as a coordinated ideological suppression of male energy by a hostile matrix.
But sociologically, one could argue it's a deadly convergence of both.
The tech industry optimizes its algorithms for one thing, engagement. And psychological studies prove that outrage and sexual stimuli generate the highest engagement.
So if the prevailing cultural narrative driven by the institutions we discussed earlier is anti-male, the algorithm will naturally amplify that anti-male outrage to keep people clicking, commenting, and fighting.
Exactly. Regardless of the intent behind the code, Riker's point is that the effect on the male psyche is undeniably devastating.
And he argues that escaping that digital trap isn't just about deleting apps. It requires replacing the digital void with something entirely physical, difficult, and undeniably real.
Which brings us to the final part of the book's blueprint. Reclaiming masculinity through what he calls the Iron Temple and the Legacy Ladder.
This is where Riker pivots from tearing down the modern world to offering a blueprint for rebuilding the individual.
He introduces the No Estrogen Protocol, the Iron Dharma, and the Brotherhood Reborn.
And he roots this absolute necessity to rebuild in a shocking 2021 statistic.
Yeah.
78% of American men admitted in a survey to having zero close friends.
Not acquaintances, not coworkers, but zero men they could call in a crisis.
That is a profound society-level crisis of isolation.
So how do men rebuild that brotherhood? According to Riker, it doesn't happen at networking events or in HR-mandated tryst falls.
It starts at the gym. He cites a men's health report showing that 89% of men actually form deeper, more meaningful friendships around a squat rack than they do in their corporate office cubicles.
The book contrasts two types of gym cultures to make a brilliant point about modern society here.
He looks at Planet Fitness versus Gold's Gym,
Right, Planet Fitness represents the Matrix. It has the lunk
a
alarm.
literal siren that goes off to shame men if they grunt, sweat too much, or drop heavy weight.
Riker argues this sterilizes masculinity into customer service politeness. It punishes effort and aggression to make the environment comfortable for people who aren't actually there to push themselves.
And he contrasts that with the old school ethos of Gold's Gym, where it's about raw, unapologetic effort. This brings us to his concept of the iron dharma.
Riker argues that modern men are constantly told to go to therapy, to sit on a couch and talk endlessly about their feelings to cure their anxiety.
But he posits that you cannot meditate your way out of a bear attack.
When you have 315 pounds of cold iron on your back during a heavy squat, it forces absolute present moment focus.
You aren't thinking about your ex-wife, you aren't thinking about HR. It demands physical toughness and undeniable reality, not obedience.
It's a physiological reset. He ties this lack of physical reality to a massive spiritual void in modern men.
The book drops this stat that 73% of men under 35 don't even know how to change a tire on their car.
They've traded hands-on competence and physical agency for swiping on glass screens and ordering Uber Eats.
So Riker suggests men fire their therapists and instead read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
The Roman emperor.
Yes. He notes that Meditations outsold Dr. Phil's latest book 10-1 recently.
Why? Because men are starving for ancient, uncompromising stoicism over modern, coddling psychobabble.
He even takes ancient philosophy and applies Buddhism's Four Noble Truths directly to modern dating apps to break the addiction.
1. Suffering exists. 2. Swiping causes the suffering. 3. Delete the app.
It's a complete total rejection of modern convenience in favor of archaic difficulty.
The book highlights the story of a former Google vice president. This guy lived in a multi-million-dollar Palo Alto smart home. Everything was automated.
He was at the top of the corporate matrix.
He sold it all, moved to Montana, and opened a survival school. Now he teaches men how to track elk, build fires with flint, and construct shelters in the snow.
The overarching lesson Riker draws from this is that genuine respect from yourself, from women, and from other men comes from dangerous, hands-on, life-sustaining skills.
Not from downloading an emotional wellness app or putting your pronouns in your email signature.
Which culminates in Riker's ultimate life plan for his readers.
Yes, I have to frame this because it is so stark and unapologetic. He calls it the legacy ladder.
The steps are incredibly simple, stripped of all modern nuance. Provide, teach, build, die, repeat.
He offers a hilarious but brutal cautionary tale, warning men not to end up like the guys he sees living in Portland.
Riding fixed-gear bicycles to vegan bakeries, wearing ironically small beanies, while their entire ancestral bloodline ends with a rescue dachshund named Lentil.
But I have to push back on this final solution. I really want to challenge the premise here.
Go ahead.
Can simply lifting heavy weights, reading dead Roman emperors, and knowing how to fix a carburetor genuinely reverse the decades of systemic trillion-dollar institutional capture that the book just spent 20 chapters outlining?
If HR still controls your paycheck and family court still controls your kids, does a 315-pound deadlift actually matter?
That is the critical synthesis of the entire text. If we look closely at Riker's argument, he is implicitly admitting defeat on a macro level.
He is acknowledging that you probably cannot change the massive captured institutions.
The university systems, the HR departments, the family courts, the media conglomerates, they are too entrenched, too well-funded, and legally fortified.
So the goal of the legacy ladder and the iron dharma is not to change the system.
It is to change the individual man so profoundly that he becomes entirely immune to the system.
By building parallel structures of male brotherhood, unshakable physical strength, emotional stoicism, and independent financial wealth, the author believes men can essentially opt out of the matrix.
You build a reality so robust that those captured institutions simply no longer have power over you.
Man, that is an incredibly heavy, intense journey we just went on.
To summarize the core of Riker's arguments in this deep dive, the book posits that our modern foundational institutions from academia to corporate HR were methodically captured by an ideology that actively pathologizes natural male biology.
It argues that family courts operate as financial guillotines, mathematically designed to strip men of their assets and their children.
It claims the media uses algorithmic outrage to numb men into compliant, dopamine-addicted beta males.
Riker's ultimate counter-revolution demands logging off, lifting heavy, reading the Stoics, and building parallel institutions based purely on merit and survival skills.
It is a radical, uncompromising manifesto for withdrawing from modern societal norms and returning to ancestral biological defaults.
And it leaves us with a critical, overarching question to consider. This isn't explicitly written in the text, but it builds directly on the logical foundation of everything Riker argues.
Imagine if a massive global crisis were to occur tomorrow morning.
A total electrical grid failure, a catastrophic natural disaster, or a true existential ground war.
In that exact moment of absolute chaos, when the institutions disappear, would the very traits that modern corporate HR departments currently label as toxic masculinity, aggression, stoicism, spatial dominance, physical force, risk-taking,
Would those instantly become the most highly valued and desperately needed currency on the planet?
that is the ultimate question for the listener.
If the world actually broke down, would the institutions somehow adapt to that brutal reality? Or would they simply collapse under the weight of it, instantly leaving the guys who know how to change a tire, track an elk, and build a fire in charge?
It's something profound to mull over as you navigate the complexities of the modern world.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everyone listening one final time as we close out. This deep dive was an objective, rigorous exploration of a highly controversial text.
We unpack the author's specific, intense worldview so you could fully understand the architecture of this cultural movement.
But we are not endorsing the politics, the claims, or the worldview within it.
We simply open the back of the watch to show you how the gears in this specific book are turning and what is driving the mechanics of this perspective.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly intense ride. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now so we can keep bringing you these massive deep dives.
If you want to read the source material for yourself, and you definitely should, to fully grasp the scoop of his arguments, head over to Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy The Truth About Feminism, a deconstruction from a man's perspective.
And you can follow the author directly at Conrad N. Riker, that's at CONRADNRIKER, over at Substack for more of his uncensored survival guides and essays.
Until next time, keep questioning how the watch works and keep looking under the hood.